Of all the compounds known, most are organic compounds. So in this video, we'll learn how organic compounds are classified in functional groups. As compounds get bigger, there's different ways to connect the atoms, so we'll look at isomers. We'll also look at this idea of delocalized electrons and how to represent these delocalized electrons with Lewis structures. Organic chemistry is the chemistry of carbon-containing compounds. These compounds can also contain hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur. Following these general bonding rules will enable us to draw the correct Lewis structures of organic compounds. Stop the video and review those rules. Biomolecules are also organic compounds, so understanding organic chemistry will help you understand biology and biochemistry. Organic compounds are classified by functional groups. A functional group is a small group of atoms within an organic compound. Each functional group has specific properties. For example, hydrocarbons, which include alkanes, alkenes, alkynes, and aromatics, are all nonpolar. Groups that contain oxygen, such as ethanol, which is an alcohol, acetone, which is a ketone, and vinegar, which is an acid, are all polar. Note that replacing an H with a C converts an alcohol to an ether, or an aldehyde to a ketone, or an acid to an ester. How can we figure out which functional group is an organic compound? One way is to determine the structure of the compound. Here are 5 experiments to help us do that. Let's focus on infrared spectroscopy. When a compound is exposed to infrared radiation, bonds will stretch or bend. It takes a different amount of energy to stretch or bend a bond depending on the atoms in the bond and the type of bond. Stop the video and make your best guess which bond type requires the most energy to stretch. And the answers are: here are the IR spectra of one hexene, which has a carbon-carbon double bond, and one octine, which has a carbon-carbon triple bond. An IR spectrum plots transmittance on the y-axis and wave number on the x-axis. Remember these equations from our study of light. Wave number units are 1 over centimeters, which means that a wave number is 1 over the wavelength. So energy is proportional to wave numbers. So the IR spectrum of one hexene shows it takes 1645 wave numbers to stretch a carbon-carbon double bond. The bottom spectrum shows it takes 2120 wave numbers to stretch a carbon-carbon triple bond. So IR shows it takes more energy to stretch a carbon-carbon triple bond than a carbon-carbon double bond. We can also conclude a carbon-carbon single bond requires the least energy to stretch. These 2 IR spectra shows 2 heptanone, which contains a ketone functional group, and 1 butanol, which contains an alcohol functional group. Stop the video and use the IR spectra to determine which bond is stronger, the CH bond or OH bond. And the answers are: 2950 wave numbers required to stretch a CH bond, 3400 wave numbers required to stretch an OH bond, so the OH bond requires more energy to stretch than the CH bond. So an IR spectrum allows us to identify specific bond types in a compound. This helps us determine the structure of a compound. We can match the bond types in the structure to the spectrum. This peak is the carbon-oxygen double bond peak. These peaks are the CH bend. The CC single bond is somewhere in the fingerprint region. And this peak is a CO single bond. With so many organic compounds, chemists came up with a systematic way for naming them. An alkane is the simplest hydrocarbon and has carbon-carbon single bonds only. Here are the names of the first 6 alkanes. The suffix tells us about the functional group. The 2-carbon alkane is ethane. The 2-carbon alkene is ethene. Let's look at methane and methanol. Remove one H from methane, that forms the methyl group. The methyl group bonds to OH, that forms methyl alcohol or methanol. So ethanol is a 2-carbon alcohol. Cholesterol is an important fat in our body. The OL tells us it has an alcohol group. Acetone is a common solvent used in fingernail polish remover. It has a ketone group. Octane is a component of gasoline as an alkane. Let's practice converting the name of an organic compound to a structure. Stop the video and try these. And the answers are: for propanol, we could put the OH group on the middle carbon. For hexanol, we could put the ketone group on any of the middle carbons. For butadiene, we could put the alkene groups on adjacent carbons. Those structures would be isomers. We'll look at isomers in more detail later. Organic compounds can be large, which means we've got to draw in all those H's in the Lewis structure. Scientists like to take shortcuts just like everyone else, so they came up with a skeletal structure. In a skeletal structure, the end of each line or bond is a carbon. the H's bonded to carbon are not drawn in. Remember the general bonding rule, 4 bonds to carbon. So if a carbon in a skeletal structure shows 1 bond, that means the 3 other bonds are to hydrogen. Here's propanol. Propanol has an alcohol functional group. H's bonded to atoms that are not carbon need to be drawn in. Let's practice. Stop the video and draw the skeletal structure of this compound. And the answer is, this compound is acetone, the simplest ketone. You've had a long day and have an adult beverage to relax. These 3 compounds shows what happens to the alcohol as it goes through your body. Stop the video and do this for each compound. And the answers are, so our body converts the ethanol to acetaldehyde. Acetaldehyde, which is very toxic to our body, is then converted to acetic acid or vinegar. For a compound that has many atoms, there can be different ways to connect the atoms. 2 compounds which have the same chemical formula but different connectivity are called isomers. For example, propanol has 2 isomers. Stop the video and check to see that the bonding is different in each isomer. Note that the bond types are the same, but the connectivity is different. The left carbon has the same number of each bond type, but the connectivity of the middle carbon is different. Butane is a common 4-carbon alkane. Stop the video and identify the 2 isomers of butane. And the answer is, A is called N-butane, C is called isobutane. That's the butane used in lighters. Structure B is C4H8, so that would be a different compound than butane. Another type of isomer are called stereoisomers. Stereoisomers have the same chemical formula, same connectivity, but a different orientation in space. One example are cis and trans isomers. You've heard of trans fats. In trans fats, the 2 H's in the alkene are on opposite sides of the double bond. In a cis fat, the 2 H's in the alkene are on the same side of the double bond. To review, structural isomers have the same chemical formula but different connectivity. Stereoisomers have the same chemical formula, same connectivity, but different orientation in space. So stop the video and figure out which isomers are structural isomers of C2H2Cl2 and which ones are stereoisomers. And the answers are, B is the cis isomer, C is the trans isomer. Another type of stereoisomer are called enantiomers. Enantiomers are mirror image isomers that are not superimposable on each other. For example, put your left hand in front of the mirror and the mirror image is your right hand. Your left hand and right hand are not superimposable on each other. In other words, they're not the same. Ibuprofen has 2 enantiomers. One enantiomer relieves pain. The other enantiomer does not work to relieve pain.